From the time a mom finds out that she's pregnant, she has dreams for her child. Just even right after conception, you begin dreaming. A dad starts thinking about the baseball game, and the mom starts thinking about baby dolls and tea parties and everything pink. And so right away, for a parent, their child matters.
At 4:51 p.m. on Tuesday, December 22nd, we welcomed Lincoln James Thrasher into our world. He was absolutely perfect. He was put onto my chest. His tiny body lay on my skin. I could see his heart beating. In those sweet 18 minutes of life, I felt peace overcome myself. And in room 1, those 18 minutes were absolutely beautiful. Greg, my mother, as well as his mother, were present in the room during the delivery, and of course, Kelly from Sufficient Grace. The grandmother shed tears of not only sadness, but happiness. Happiness that they were able to be there to witness the life of their grandbaby. At 5:09 p.m., Lincoln had been pronounced deceased. I looked over at my husband, and his tears poured down his rough, stubbled cheeks. The next few hours, Kelly helped us to bathe Lincoln, to clothe him. We put a choo-choo train diaper on him, along with a powder blue swaddle wrapped in a beautiful knitted mint powder blue and white blankie that matched his hat. Those 5 hours spent with our heavenly angel we will never get back. We rocked, we sang to him, and prayed over him. I kissed those sweet lips, fingers, and toes. The sweet lips, fingers, and toes I would never be able to watch grow. That would not fit into his first pair of shoes or first pair of winter mittens. The sweet, soft lips that will never kiss his mommy's cheek. How could such a sweet boy be so perfect? His ears, fingers, and toes were mine without a doubt. His lips and nose were Greg's. How could his little head be so strong, but yet have a hole at the top of his crown? A small hole that was the answer to the inevitable, the reason why God had made him so perfect and so special that he was sacrificed here on earth to be sent straight to heaven after 18 minutes. He was just too perfect for earth. My life has been forever changed. Sorry.
Sufficient Grace Ministries provides support for families walking through a perinatal loss and those who have a life-limiting diagnosis in pregnancy. So families who face a miscarriage, a stillbirth, a neonatal loss, an infant death up to age 3. Throughout the state of Ohio, we actually send comfort doulas and remembrance photographers to come and walk alongside these families to bring clothes to fit their babies, mementos, memory-making items, resources and books, a baby book to say, this baby matters, a place for them to write the dreams they had for their child. So we provide those kinds of resources in person in the hospital. Part of our job is to think, what do they need? What are they going to need for this experience? What are they going to need, not just right now, but in a week, 2 weeks, in a month from now? Because we can't take the grief and the pain of that moment, but we can alleviate those regrets that are coming for not knowing that you had an option to get your baby's footprints, to have an outfit that fit your baby, to have a little tiny diaper to fit your baby. So our comfort doulas bring all of those things so the family doesn't have to go looking for them. And we provide support through the birth, afterward, online, some of our families even months and years later. In addition to supporting families in person, we also ship resources all over the world to families. We've done that since 2004, and we provide perinatal loss support education for birth professionals in compassionate care that's patient-centered. So we want to focus on what is important and helpful for these families. It's our calling at Sufficient Grace Ministries to provide love and support to any grieving heart in front of us, no matter how they came to be that way. We've served families who have chosen not to continue their pregnancy when they've received a life-limiting diagnosis. We've served families who have had a life-limiting condition and continued the pregnancy and provided our support for them. Families who find out their baby has no heartbeat. We have been with parents who have had drug addiction issues. We've been with mothers who are involved in prostitution. We've been with moms who occasionally, if a mom has an abortion, an elective abortion, and is dealing with some grief from that and wants to acknowledge that her baby matters and her baby lived, and she's kind of maybe months or years into that grief, we've had many write to us and say, could I have a memory book? Could I have a bear? And yeah, because if we're going to say that every life matters, then we need to live like every life matters.
I think without sufficient grace, we wouldn't have any kind of tokens or memories to like physically hold on to. Kelly was with us, and she bathed our baby. Her name is Clara. She took the time to bathe her. I was too nervous to bathe her because her skin was very delicate, and I didn't want to cause any more harm to it. So Sufficient Grace, took the time to bathe our baby. They took pictures of us and created those memories for us. They did canvas and took the handprints and the footprints. They took
They brought outfits and stuff.
Outfits. So it was little hand crocheted outfits that I don't remember. Somebody within Sufficient Grace does them, and so she brought a couple outfits, and thankfully she brought a big one because Clara needed it. And then they brought the bears, and so our Clara, we buried her with a little miniature bear about yay big, and then we got a matching one this big that we actually still sleep with every night, and that has been the comfort bear. We actually refer to it as the comfort bear and call it a her. They took snippets of her hair, and so I have some of those in a little baggie at home, but also having the snippets of hair, I was able to get actually a necklace like this done that I can keep her hair in it with the flowers that I had in her room. So I usually keep that with me wherever I go and have a little piece of her with me. So we wouldn't have any of that. Like, we were in such a state of shock that we wouldn't have thought we would have had cell phones to take pictures if we would have even thought about that.
I think if you have a loss of a child, it's good for you to maybe talk about it sometimes, not all the time. There's times you don't want to talk about it, but there's times when you want to talk about it, and it just helps get a burden off your chest. So if you're feel that way, it helps you to know that, there's nothing wrong with talking about it. It helps get it, off your chest. You could be that person to help give hope to somebody else that might be going through it. That's kind of what Sufficient Grace has done for us.
I guess if I were to say one thing, it would be to family and friends, coworkers, acquaintances, whoever, that don't be afraid to mention, our daughter, because you not mentioning almost makes it worse because it's like she was forgotten. So please ask us about her. We want to talk about her. Most of the time, I might cry. I cry pretty frequently. I never used to be a crier. Now I cry pretty easily. But I might cry, but I feel so much better being able to talk about her. Like, it lets me know that you're thinking about her, and that's one of the greatest gifts that I can be given.
When your baby dies, you don't hear people say their name. I speak the names of my live children, every day. When they're growing up, you're yelling at them to come in for dinner or pick up their shoes, or you're hearing their name. You hear it announced for honor roll. You hear it announced when it's their turn to bat. You hear it throughout their life. It's who they are. But no one wants to talk about the names of the babies who died. So I think people always ask me, how can I support a family when they're going through a loss, friends and loved ones? And I always say their name for one. Start with saying their name. Ask them what their baby's name was, because there's so much power into being able to speak it. We were at a remembrance walk once, and one of our volunteers was there, and it had been 60 years since her baby died. And 60 years ago, they definitely didn't ask you the name. Many of those women didn't even get to go to their own babies' funerals. And they didn't see their babies. And they thought it was much better to protect them and not give them anything tangible to say this baby was here. And many of them lost their minds or had severe depression and mental health issues. Many women went through terrible things because they weren't able to grieve. But that woman, 60 years later, at this remembrance walk, mentioned to me as she's handing muffins to the runners and the 5K people, I had a son. And I said, what was his name? She said, Matthew. And 60 years she carried his name, and she doesn't get to say it. And that's happened more than once. Sometimes it's 30 years, sometimes it's 40 years. But that name, that's in a mom's heart, whether she gets to speak it or not. And so there's great power in giving her the opportunity to say their names.
I had heard about Sufficient Grace from one of my coworkers who had mentioned it to me and just said it would be a good resource to look into. At the time I was like, okay. It was a shock when we first found out. So it took me a while to look into a lot of the resources that we had. And then when I joined some anencephaly groups on Facebook, they connected me with one of the people that work here. And she talked to me, and at the time I'm like, I don't even know what a doula is. Like, I don't know if that's what I want. I don't know what to do right now. And so she was kind of just like, all right, well, I'm here if you need me. If you just want to talk, you can come in. So that's what I ended up doing, and it was a blessing, going to the meetings with me and being like a support person for me, because I didn't have a lot of the support at the time when we first found out, because it was unknown. Nobody knew what to expect, and I think just having that extra reinforcement and someone to walk alongside me so that I wasn't alone really helped. And then afterwards, when we had her, we got to use the cuddle cot, which was amazing. And at first I was unsure of it because I didn't know if I wanted to keep her with me or, what I wanted to do. And a lot of my family who's older, it was kind of different for them because they didn't used to do that. But I think after having her and being able to keep her with me, it gave everyone a chance to say goodbye to her and meet her and just love on her. Whereas if we didn't have the cuddle cot, I wouldn't have had that time to really bond with her. That has tied into the healing process for me, having stuff from Aria's birth and having her footprints and handprints and pictures of her has brought me a lot of peace, because I only got 3 days with her instead of, a lifetime. And so it's good for me to look back on those, to remember that day and to remember, what she looks like. And she had my hair, and she had, my son's nose, and she looked like her dad. And it was, for me, seeing her, I saw her for who she was, and I saw her as, my baby. And it was easy for me to see, okay, she has parts of me and she has parts of her dad. And, that's all I saw. I didn't see her defect that she was born with. Just because she had a terminal diagnosis doesn't mean that she was any less of a baby for me.
I think one of the things that families hesitate when they're offered our services, if they haven't, let's start with families who are in an emergent situation where they didn't know ahead of time their baby had a diagnosis and they just found out their baby has no heartbeat. Let's start there. There's the shock factor. So you're shocked, you're processing, and then there's that feeling of, do we really want a stranger entering this space? Is it going to be helpful? is that something I even want? Do I want pictures of my baby? Do I want these things? Maybe it's easier if I just move on and forget as quickly as possible. And so there's that feeling of not knowing really what you want, because who sits around thinking, what would I do if my baby died? We just don't do that. So not knowing is one factor that keeps a family from reaching out. And another, those who get a life-limiting diagnosis, it's very similar to hospice situation, where often we don't want to make that call because then it's like reality setting in, that time is short. It's like accepting that some people might say there's no hope, but that's absolutely not how we feel. So what I would say to that is a couple things. In the emergent situations where a family doesn't know ahead of time, I speak to the parent when I walk in. You may not think that you want to have pictures now. It might be really hard to think of doing these things. But in a week, in a month, in 2 months, you may look back and wish that you had them, and we can't go back. And your baby is worthy of celebration. This is still his or her birthday. And so what I'm here to do, as hard as it is, and as much as this hurts right now, as much as this isn't part of the plan that you had originally, what I'm here to do is to help you celebrate your baby. Often what breaks the barrier down the most is that I'm a mom who's been through it. Not only am I coming in as a professional who does this work, but I can say, I lost my twin daughters at 26 weeks. And they were stillborn. And this is what I was able to do, and this is what I wish I could have done. And this is what most families I work with say. I wish I would have had a picture. I wish I would have held them longer. So when they're scared, hearing I've been through it, I'm not just coming in telling them this is what you should do. I'm a mom who has laid in that bed. And for the families who've had a diagnosis, I've also been through that. Our son was diagnosed midway through pregnancy with Potter syndrome, which is a life-limiting condition, and we carried him to term, close to term, and had him for 6 hours before he passed. So when a family comes to me and they're carrying a baby and they've heard the news that their child is incompatible with life, that's the words that the medical community uses, when they hear those words, I've heard those words too.
If it wasn't for Sufficient Grace Ministries, I probably would have never got the maternity photos done. Just during the whole entire pregnancy, I guess, I felt like any questions I had, I could come and ask, just because it's hard to ask those questions to people that have never experienced the loss before. And then during delivery, Kelly was there the whole entire time, which I thought was amazing. I didn't actually think she was going to come until after the baby had been born. And I'm just so thankful for, SGM in order to give us all those things, because we would have never had, the hair clippings, all those little things that I would have never had, without you guys. I would have never had any of that stuff. And I know that to be true because I guess in the moment, I probably would have never thought about wanting those things, So it was nice that, it was kind of nice to know ahead of time that we had time to talk with SGM and know the options that we did have with the memorial things that we could get and stuff like that. Matter of fact, SGM gives you a matching bracelet for mother and daughter, and I actually got it tattooed on my wrist because I was always afraid of wearing it because if it fell off or, and that to me was, even though it's just a little bracelet, to me that was a direct connection because she was buried with that bracelet on. So I got it tattooed on the same wrist that she had it on when she was buried, and just things that you can never get back. You have a small window of time to get everything that you would want from that child during their whole entire life, but you only have a very small window to get it all, and if you don't get it then, you can't get it. You can't go back and get it later. I had to have it then, or not at all. That was the choice you have.
Sufficient Grace serves 5 regions all throughout the state of Ohio. And one of the things that I am most in awe of that God has done to meet the needs of this ministry is the women that He has sent to serve as regional coordinators of each of those regions, and the comfort doulas and remembrance photographers who sacrifice leaving their families, for this call. And it truly is a calling. It's a mission field. The women who dedicate their time and their families who dedicate their mom or the wife in that household, those women are truly servant hearts, and they are the backbone of Sufficient Grace Ministries. No one is more equipped to parent their child, whether alive or not, than their parents. What we get to do as comfort doulas when we come in is help them have that experience. We get to help them create those memories. And so the way their baby smelled, we have that lasts a lifetime, that smell and that memory. And so we hand them that baby soap. And when we hand them that diaper and they pin that diaper, you'll see their face light up because they can't believe that there's a diaper to fit their baby. So, and then having the footprints, those are the things they hold on to. And so having something tangible to say, this baby was here, this baby mattered, not only brings them comfort initially and validates the value of their child initially, but in years to come. I think even more so in those years, because yes, it gets them through those initial moments. It gives them that next thing to do, but they take it home with them. They don't get to take their baby home. So to have something to hang on the wall, to have something to look at, to get out, it completely changes the story for them. It's hard to actually find words to fully convey what those things mean because it seems like it's just stuff. And we always walk away feeling like we didn't do very much because you can't give them the thing that you really want to give them, just to give them back their baby. You know, I can't do that. But what I can do is help them celebrate their baby and help them honor their baby and say that this baby matters and give them something to hold on to.
With the diagnosis, we were given some resources from the hospital that were, I think, very similar to what Sufficient Grace offers, not as in-depth, but just kind of standard procedure for the hospital. And we were told about Sufficient Grace through friends and family and just the community, and with Kelly being in our community, you were well known, unfortunately. But I think we were just kind of at a place where we were angry and mad that, you know, we even had to talk about this. So you reached out, and we really didn't want it. But I'm really glad we did. And it was, you know, hard to even really think about that stuff at the time, but you were right. All the stuff you said was right, and we really did want it. So, and I think one of the biggest things was that Sufficient Grace helped us celebrate him in a otherwise circumstance that I think normally people wouldn't necessarily celebrate the pregnancy. When I actually think back to that day, I think of just the peace. And I think, you know, God being there and you guys, you helped our families, you know, go through the whole process, and you just had everything laid out, and it was just perfect, and as perfect as it could have been. Sufficient Grace kind of gave us the opportunity to talk about it because, you know, I feel like society is finally opening up a little bit more about these babies and the fact that, you know, they are worth celebrating, and that it's okay to admit that, you know, things aren't going the way they should. So I think Sufficient Grace just really helped us kind of come together during such a difficult time.
Some families want more support than others and more connection than others after their loss. We'll reach out usually with a text, a phone call, an email, checking on them. Some of our families we've worked with already for months in advance in those perinatal hospice cases. We always try to kind of connect in whatever way the family wants to connect. You know, you have people who are texters and you have people who want to talk on the phone, and so we try to adapt to what's important to them. And we also have monthly support groups where families can come here to the Sufficient Grace headquarters house in Northwest Ohio, and Northeast Ohio has a location as well in Wadsworth. Marietta has a support group. We also have an online support group, and actually that's the most active, because at 1 a.m. they can type how they're feeling and someone will answer, whether it's a mom further along on the journey or a father or one of us. So one of the doulas and perinatal loss support companions.
Once we returned back to the room, I was able to do the skin to skin, the kangaroo care with her, just like I did with Harper, our firstborn. So that was nice. So it really, that was what, yeah, because while she was inside you, I didn't have much bonding at all. I could feel her kick and everything, but that was my chance right there to build the connection with her. So the kangaroo care really helped, and the nurses, everybody treated it like it was a, perfectly healthy baby, and so that was really great.
Kelly encouraged you to do that too.
Yeah, Kelly.
You weren't sure if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was really nervous what I was gonna, I was worried about the sight of her and everything and how that was gonna affect me for the future, but it was a comfortable environment and everything, so that worry just faded away.
Yeah.
So the kangaroo care, that really helped me. I'm glad Kelly recommended that.
Would you call Kelly through all this?
Oh, Kelly was my hero. I still refer to her as our hero, because I don't know how we could have done it without. Because she was able to tell us what was going to happen, help us plan.
Spending that time with your child that day, it might seem like it's going to be so scary or so tragic or so hopeless, but that day was filled with joy. And even the next day, I had friends come and visit me in the hospital, and they said, you were just radiating joy after you lost your daughter. And to be able to share all the memories that we made with her and show my friends her handprints and the dresses she wore and her little hats that she wore, and we had some pictures, to be able to share those things, it let me be a mother, and it let me brag about my daughter, and it let me show her off, and it helped make so many memories. Yes, it was a hard day, and there was weeping, and there was pain and grief and sorrow, but when I think about that day, I don't think about those things anymore. I think about the good, and I think about the special times that we got to spend with Eva. And it's hard. The next days, weeks, months, years to follow is hard, and you're still sad, and you still will mourn, and you'll still miss your child, but to be able to have those joyous, positive, special memories is something that we'll always value. Sufficient Grace, they had a photographer there with us that day, and they took really special pictures. They gave us special little props to use. This is a picture that we have up in our house, and it's one that's really special to us, and our daughter Harper loves this one. We got to make some footprints. This is something that Kelly had brought the day that she was born, this canvas, and it's something that we have hanging in our house. And just to be able to look at that and to remember, oh my goodness, her feet were that tiny. And that's something also, it's hard because our daughter, she was almost 2 years old when Eva was born. And so it was really hard for her to understand what was going on. And she knew we were having a baby, but she didn't understand necessarily why she wasn't coming home with us. But for us to have these mementos and be able to show her, you have a little baby sister named Eva, and she's up in heaven, but she got to spend a little bit of time with us, and these are her footprints, and this is what she looked like. And we love having this stuff because when Harper sees it, she'll tell other people. We had some visitors last weekend, and she brought them to this picture, and she said, this is my baby sister Eva, and I love her so much. And that was just so special to us to be able to see her share about her sister also.
So 15 years ago, I was just a mom in my basement making memory books. That was the first thing that we did at Sufficient Grace was the Dreams of You memory book. And we created it. I actually created it because I was looking for a gift to give to a mom who had gone through a loss. And it was 8 years after my losses. It wasn't something I rushed in to start right away after our losses. It was 8 years later. And I wanted to give her a memory book that said her baby mattered, and I couldn't find one. So God laid it on my heart to make one. So that was the first thing that happened. And then my mom started making the comfort bears because we wanted a bear to go with the book so that mom had something to hold when she left the hospital. And it was just this mom in her basement in the beginning. You know, that was kind of how it began. And I started to contact hospitals, and sometimes they would allow me to come in, this little mom from her basement with her little handmade memory book with no crafting abilities. I have none. And they saw the heart of it, these couple hospitals here and there. And as time went on, I began to connect with more and more families and hear their stories. And we would add, you know, from their stories, from their regrets, we would add different things to give to them. What would bring comfort to them? What would bring hope? We're constantly thinking of that. And over those years, you know, we learned, birth professionals would say no one provided any education for us on this subject. So then we would create workshops to speak to that from a parent's perspective. And then we would hear stories. I didn't know I could hold my baby. I didn't have clothes to fit my baby. I didn't know I could put a diaper on my baby. And so, okay, let's have some volunteers come in and make those things. And every single time we had a desire or a vision for the next thing, like maybe make gowns, maybe make bracelets, God would send a person. No one can tell me that God is not working and moving and having his hand mightily on this work. And because of that, I don't really have to, you know, a lot of big things continue to happen, things that are so unlikely, things that I would never have believed. We're in multiple hospitals and serving hundreds of families, and all of those things are happening. But the miracles of seeing human beings give like that, give their talents, their gifts, give financially, whatever they have to give, that is beautiful. That's the body of Christ. That's what it looks like. The generosity just blows my mind to see that over and over again. And we get to see it so much here because there's so many times where it makes no earthly sense what's happening. How would anyone know that we had a need right then? And then bam, it's met. It's incredible.